One of the most simple methods of debugging a project is to simply trace out bits of text in variables. In this lesson, we'll demonstrate how this is done. So here I have an FLA, and we have a movie clip symbol right here with the instance name of icon, and then we have an actions layer, and if I expand my actions panel, I can see that in here we add an event listener to our icon of type event.enterFrame. So upon every frame, so 24 times per second, we're going to invoke this particular function here, animate horizontally. And here's the function definition, function animate horizontally, and we pass through the event from the enterFrame event. So within that function block, we're going to test and check whether icon's X position is less than or equal to the stage.stageWidth minus the icon width divided by 2. The reason that we're checking the icon width divided by 2 is because its X position is actually calculated from the registration and transform point, which are at the center right here. So it's basically half of the width of our icon. So as long as the X position of our icon is less than or equal to this particular number, we're going to move icon.x plus 3 from where it is right now. So plus equals always means add some number to the current value. So if we test this by going to Control, Test Movie, Test, we can see that the icon indeed moves 3 pixels every frame until it hits this point where it tends to stop. So when that happens, its X position right here is actually more than the total stage width minus half of the icon width. So this is its landing position. So that works fine. But what if we actually want to trace and see what each of these positions are as we're going through? Well, to do that, we can use a trace statement. So here is the syntax to a trace statement. And within the parentheses, we're going to put some sort of a bit of text and a variable, and we can put all sorts of stuff in there, whatever we want to spit out in the console window. So I'm going to say icon.x, and then I'm going to concatenate that string with the actual variable icon.x. So you can see here we have a string because it's enclosed in these little quote marks. And then we use the plus operator to concatenate with this variable here. So this is going to return as a number, but since we're concatenating a number with a string, it'll all spit out as a string. So we can trace that, and let's also trace on the next line something like this. So that's what we're calculating against. And this is really the stopping point. So for sort of like a label here, I'm just going to call it stopper and concatenate both of those pieces. Finally, what I'm going to do is just put a little separator here. And this will make sure that we have this separator between each of these particular bits. We could always trace all this out on one line, but for readability's sake, I'm tracing them out on 3. All right, so we can save our project. I just hit Control S, but you could also go to File, Save. And all we need to do to actually trace this stuff is test once again. So Control, Test Movie, Test. So we've got an error down here. So compiler errors happen when we have some sort of a problem in our code, but we don't actually see that problem until we try to compile and run the application. And we can see here that we get an error, implicit coercion of a value of type string to an unrelated type number. And it tells us here that frame 1, line 6. So here's line 6. And notice that it takes this number just fine and concatenates it with our string. Yet here, because we're doing something a little more complex, it has a problem actually concatenating all this with a string. So what we can do to remedy this is to actually explicitly wrap this as a string. So we invoke string and then pass in that entire value. And this will convert that value into a string for us. Okay, so we save once again, and control, test movie, test. All right, so we can see down here what's being traced out. And I can even close this now and collapse our actions panel and expand our output panel. In the output panel, if it's not already open, it will open whenever you trace anything out. So you don't ever have to really open the output panel manually. So we can see that we're actually adding 3 to the X position each time. And eventually, it gets down to 425. And you can see that it just keeps going because we're just spitting it out at every enter frame. So if we find the point, here we go. So if we find the point in our log here, and there it is. So here's the point where they match, right? So the icon X position is 422, and the stopper marker is 422. You can notice here that it actually goes one beyond that to go to 425. The reason for that is because we are actually checking to see whether it's less than or equal to this number. Let's try this again, removing the equal sign. Control, test movie, test. And here it goes. And notice now it actually stops at 422. It doesn't go beyond there. So now they both match. And we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't actually traced out all these specific numbers. So this has been an example of how to use trace statements to debug a project within Flash Professional CS6.